With Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, I have a chance to win $500 for being selected as contestant of the game, plus another $500 for every Orioles homer, and $5,000 for every...
Grand Slam-a-lama-ding-dong!
Make the right call to play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery.
Good morning, Baltimore. It is Monday, May 4th, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Matt, it's great to see you. You look comfy. Nice hoodie. You're in the hotel, just lounging. Look good.
Actually, down here at my brother's place in Fort Lauderdale. Went to the beach yesterday. Orioles are playing the Marlins next week, so getting down here a couple of days early, catching up with my brother. And then meeting the team on Tuesday. So, yeah, getting some sun, although today it is absolutely pouring. So hopefully that goes away soon.
That's awesome. I was going to say the first real, I shouldn't say it, make it sound like I don't go outside, but like the first had our first like stand in the sun for 30 minutes at Ravens practice or at rookie minicamp on, what day is it today? This will come out on Monday. So, okay. Which is great. So it was nice to just get outside and kind of get back in the mix, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, usually when it warms up, football activity is starting to happen. You're out on the field getting to see things, and it was rookie minicamp this week, which we'll get into some undrafted free agents, things like that. And on the back half of the show, we'll talk. Orioles lineup has largely been underperforming so far this year. We've talked a lot about Colton Cowser and his struggles, but he's not alone. So we'll dive into 5 players that we think need to be discussed and unpacked a little bit as to why they haven't been able to hit their groove at the plate a month into the season. But let's talk some Ravens first, Sam. And first wanted to spotlight your Zion Young story. You did a great feature diving into the past and what led up to the Ravens' second-round pick landing in Baltimore. And you got a lot of great background on him from guys who knew him back in high school and from there. What was just kind of what stood out to you in doing that reporting about the kind of guy that they got in Zion Young?
More than anything, and thank you, more than anything, I think that it changed the way I view or think about like the pick itself because of what the fair knocks on him, where I feel like I have a better understanding of what the Ravens saw in him, because I'm not someone who watched 10, 11, 12 Missouri football games grinding Zion Young film throughout the fall. But his biggest knock is, why do they spend a second round pick on a guy who's going to be very similar to Tavius Robinson? A guy who's going to be a really good edge setter, who's going to be a really hard worker, and who is just not the pass rusher that you think the team might go for so high in the draft. But I think I walked away from a lot of those conversations with a much better understanding of how Zion Young developed over his career, the kind of person and the kind of player the Ravens are getting, and probably what the Ravens saw on tape and saw from him and learned from him that makes them confident that he'll be able to develop and grow into the kind of player that they envision him to be. The thing about Zion is that he's the kind of guy that when he sets his mind to something, it's really hard to stop him. It's really hard to slow him down. He's such a hard worker. We learned the night he got drafted, we learned about how in high school he was one of the Hellraisers, which was Jasper Grimes was the defensive line coach at Westlake, and he came up with this mantra for the defensive line group at one of the best high school football programs in all of Georgia and truly around the country. I mean, Westlake has had 11 draft picks since the year 2000, and that's more than any other high school in all of the state of Georgia. One of them, notably Nate Wiggins, and Zion became kind of the face of the Hellraisers. And Jasper had a quote in the story where he was like, "We're Hellraisers. That's what we do. We show up and we raise hell, and like that's what you want in your defensive line." And he's like, sometimes some of the best guys at that position, edge rushers and interior defensive line, like can be cool when they're quiet and they're a little intimidating, but you want guys like Zion because. And this is, from some of the conversation I was having, is like you want a guy who you hear before you can see. You want a guy who's just going to push you around, who's going to shove offensive linemen out of the way, and who's going to just balls to the wall, kind of give you everything he has. And it was funny to hear them talk about his persona, his personality, how he fits that mold of being the Hellraiser. Jasper Grimes had said that he's gonna be the face of the Hellraisers in the NFL because he's the one that's really carried on that mantra through college and onto the NFL. And so it's funny to hear them all say this. And then Zion Young said at the combine actually that he sees himself as the kind of guy who you're going to hear him before you see him. And on Saturday we're at rookie camp, and the entire team meets after stretching, and you can't really see who's in the middle, but you can hear who's in the middle. And it was Zion Young breaking them down and getting them ready for practice. And that's all to say that the kind of guy they're getting is someone who, as he has said, he wants to be a sponge and learn as much as he can, but he's not going to be outworked. He's going to be the loudest, the strongest, the toughest in every room. He's going to push himself to new heights. And I guess just one quick anecdote to tease from the story too is when he was about 14 or 15, Zion Young was academically ineligible for his sophomore year of high school, and he couldn't play football, and it was really hard because, as his dad told me, none of his 10 older siblings had any trouble with academics. But Zion basically got to high school and, for lack of a better phrase, kind of thought he was hot shit because he was such a good football player and he was on trajectory to be a star at Westlake. He was on varsity his freshman year. He was playing a bunch. His dad said he could really tell by the end of that freshman year that he had something like this kid has a future in this sport. And he failed all his classes because he didn't apply himself to academics. So during his sophomore year, he's academically ineligible, and all he did was do homework and work out. And his Missouri defensive line coach, who originally recruited Zion before he chose Michigan State for 2 seasons, ended up transferring to Missouri, his defensive line coach told me that when the Young family came to visit Mizzou, his dad showed him a video of Zion at like 14, probably about 15 years old, sophomore in high school. And he's in the home gym that he built when he was really young. And he's got 225 on the bar, 15-year-old, just boom, 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 boom on a burnout set, repping 14 at 225. And before he did it, before his dad was telling me, before that video, he went and got 2 of Zion's older brothers, and he's like, "You got to come see this. You got to come see this. You got to come down." And they're like, "What, whatever." And his dad was like, "You just got to see the kind of weight your brother's putting up, and what I've had him do, but having him do in the gym." They're like, "Nah, this isn't real. Like, you're kidding." And they were all floored. The Missouri coach was floored. They couldn't believe. And that, again, that's all to say that what he saw in Zion at that age is a kid who can push himself and exert so much energy and passion into something at that young of an age that it shows signs of what you can do when you're older, when you're able to channel that energy in different ways. And I think what the Ravens saw at Mizzou is a guy whose feet never stop churning, a guy who's going to push his teammates. He was a team captain at Mizzou, and a guy who wants to learn and grow and get better and wants to be a great football player in this league and loves the idea of coming to Baltimore where there are historic defenses. And historically, what they saw on tape, like that kind of, Jesse Minter called it a train wreck when he made offensive line, but his ability to keep his feet moving, and push guys back, like that is what translates well to the NFL. So again, like I feel like the biggest thing I really learned and took away from the story and a lot of the reporting for it is that they see the trajectory for what Zion can be, an exceptional set the edge guy, run defender, but that they'll be able to mold him into being a really effective pass rusher in the NFL. And I'm just excited to see him and Anthony Weaver in the same room.
You said he was 15 when he was pumping out the 225?
Yeah.
I think I remember vividly the first time I hit 225 on a bench press, and I was 15. So that was the first time completing one rep, at 225. So the fact that he was just pumping them out like that is insane to hear. And when you draft an edge rusher in the second round, there's going to be some kind of question mark about their game, their skill set, whatever. For him, it's maybe like about the number of moves that he has in an arsenal and ability to get off of the tackles on the edge. But when you draft a guy in the second round, the intangibles have got to be there, and the tenacity that is so clear for a player like Zion Young really shines through, I think, in that story, but also just in the kind of player that the Ravens seem to think that they have, somebody who is going to be willing to do whatever it takes. So, someone who maybe can be taught some of those moves on the outside and really become that well-rounded edge rusher that the Ravens are really hopeful he can be. So, like I said, it was a great story, and definitely go over to BaltimoreSun.com and give that a read to get all the little nuggets in there, because it's a lot.
Yeah, well, just one more thing, and then we can move on about that story. And I do encourage folks listening to go read more about the story. But the Ravens really wanted Zion, and we know that because when Zion Young went on his 30 visit, he did 10 top 30 visits, one of them in Baltimore. And when he left, the Ravens were like, "Hey, we're going to save that number 9 jersey for you." Number 9, famously worn by kicker Justin Tucker. But they told Zion,
He's
like,
not
"Hey,
retired.
hey, we're going to save that number 9 jersey for you." And at the end of the first night of the draft, Zion was pretty disappointed that he didn't go in the first round. I think a lot of mocks had him end of the first or a second round pick, maybe more second round. But Zion thought he had a real chance to go late first. And at the end of the night, 30 picks go by, and Zion's phone rings, and it's the Ravens. And they say, "If you're on the board, when we get to 45 tomorrow, we're picking you." So I think those two things really show that how serious the Ravens were, how high on their board he was, how realistic of an option they felt like he was, and above all else, maybe just that they feel like he fits what they want this Ravens defense to be moving forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. And he's going to have a lot of guys to lean on in terms of veterans in this group with Trey Hendrickson, but also Calais Campbell, who wanted to mention here, Ravens signed to a 1-year deal to bring back the former standout. He's 39 years old. Jesse Minter said he was stoked over the weekend. Sam, quick reactions there to the Calais Campbell signing?
I think it makes sense because they have great relationships in the building. He's going to be 40 start of the season, but he's had over 5 sacks each of the last 4 seasons, I think. And I think they just see a guy who can still contribute, who can be a great veteran in the room, who can add to that defensive line, a position that they needed to add in some capacity. And yeah, I think they're excited about just getting the last bit of juice of what he has in the tank. Calais is the oldest defensive player in the NFL, so that's a fun little side stat for you. But yeah, Jesse Minter pretty stoked. I think Ravens feel like they can just kind of squeeze out the last bit of juice, and he'll be able to help that defense. He fits that whole we want to get back to what we were as a defense mold.
Yeah, and even with his age, was still, I believe, among interior defensive linemen last year, second highest QB pressure rate in the NFL. So certainly still playing, maybe not at the top of his game, but as good as you can expect a 39-year-old player to be. So obviously in great shape, and padding a group that they're hoping to get Nnamdi Madubuike back. Probably not going to be starting the season, so at least padding that depth chart a little bit early on, and we'll see what that group kind of looks like as the season goes on. On the other side of the line, we did see Vega Ioane playing both left guard and right guard. Reading the tea leaves there, Sam, do you feel like it's kind of open, that they're looking at both positions, or do you think they're leaning one way or the other?
It's hard to say just because we're only in rookie minicamp. It's May. I think we'll have a much better understanding once we get to training camp, maybe even OTAs, kind of see what that looks like once they're with the full team. But it's worth noting that he was repping at both left and right guard. He's almost definitely going to play guard for the Ravens, but he has experience on both sides from college, and I think part of it will be he's a very versatile player. Do they feel like Emory Jones Jr. better fits on the left side? Do they feel like John Simpson would be his partner at the other guard spot, and maybe he fits more specifically on one side? So I think they're going to kind of look at that group holistically and say Venga's probably the most versatile of the three. Where do we feel like makes the most sense for the other guys, or when they figure out who the 2 starters are? But certainly all of them will play all over the offensive line throughout training camp until they figure out exactly what this group is going to look like.
Yeah, and injuries sometimes often make things easier as the offseason goes on and into training camp, but certainly with Simpson there, you feel like left guard might be the more natural spot for Ioane, but Like I said, the center position being so open right now, what they decide to do at that spot could very well have some domino effects as well. So something to monitor as the offseason goes on. Now, let's get into the meat of it here. We wanted to talk undrafted free agents. Diego Pavia is obviously making a lot of headlines here, but UDFAs in Baltimore do have a bit of a history of making impact. Last year, 3 undrafted free agents made the Ravens 53-man roster, and they added a 4th into the season. Safety Keandre Jackson made it midseason, joining linebacker Jay Higgins, cornerback Keon Martin, and safety Ruben Lowry. So certainly some guys who spent a lot of time on the roster last year. As we look at this group now of UDFAs, we kind of wanted to run through 5 different guys who maybe are candidates and choose 3 each of that 5 who we think have the best chance of making the team. So, Sam, why don't you start us off here running through this list?
Yeah, so a quick note from last year. It's been years and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there was a streak of, I think I want to say it's like 20 years where the Ravens have had at least one UDFA make the roster every year. Last year they had 3 make the final 53 at the start of the season, and there was questions about which one of these 3, and injuries played a big part, which is why 2 of them were defensive backs and eventually a 3rd on special teams. They needed some depth at linebacker, so you get Jay Higgins, but that was a really impressive group of UDFAs from what we saw in training camp. Pivoting to or turning the page to this year, you have to imagine that, let me say this, there will definitely be at least one, because one of these quarterbacks is going to be the number 3 quarterback to presumably play on the practice squad. And then the question is there another position where they feel like they need a guy? So starting with quarterback, Joe Fignano from UConn, 25-year-old who started 45 games over 7 seasons between UConn and Miami. And then you mentioned Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt. He was the Heisman runner-up. It's been 23 years since a Heisman runner-up did not get drafted, but obviously there are questions about Diego Pavia's, I don't want to say off-field issues, that feels unfair, but just their character concerns.
Attitude, really.
Attitude, yeah. Most notably when he did not win the Heisman, he posted on social media, F all the voters, which he later apologized for. But also, no quarterback under 5'10" has ever been drafted in the modern era. Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, both 5'10". Diego Pavia, although I think Vanderbilt lists him at 6 foot, is 5'9"
Hell no.
3/4. 5'9". He's over 5'9". He's under 5'10". That's per the NFL Combine measurements. So Diego Pavia will be an interesting one. I mean, those 2 will duke it out through rookie minicamp and OTAs and maybe into training camp to figure out one of those quarterbacks will be the UDFA to make it. Beyond that, there's an interesting collection, and the other 3 we have on this list, Nick Dawkins, who's a center from Penn State, played next to Vega. He was a team captain at Penn State. He's known for having a high football IQ, and perhaps above all else, he's at a position of need. I think coming into this conversation and rookie minicamp and just thinking about kind of what they might do at center because they didn't draft a surefire guy, you start to wonder, like, is a UDFA center going to be any better than the 3 guys they already have on the roster? And the answer is probably not, but you're going to at least try. You're going to take as many guys as you can fit into training camp and the off-season programming and see if he can compete above the others, because the other 3 are just so unproven that you don't know. Nick Dawkins could come in and be the best of those guys. Some projections had him getting drafted, so it'll be interesting to see whether he can fight in that group and how that group shakes out.
Yeah, and before you jump in the last 2, just want to add on Dawkins. I mean, one, bringing him in, giving a familiar face for Ioane just doesn't hurt. As a guy, like you said, who's a captain and clearly spent a lot of time with Ioane and team meetings and things like that, playing alongside him. So getting some comfort level for your first-round pick, never a bad idea. But also, with the Ravens' potential to probably solve their center issue around the June 1st cutoff date, having a look at Dawkins in minicamp here and getting a closer look at the kind of player he is kind of gives you a better chance of what you might have at the position internally before you make any kind of external investment at that spot. So like you said, there's other guys who are just equally as unproven who are in competition for that center job, but adding another name to the mix can't hurt. And getting a chance to get a look at him ahead of when you have to make any kind of decision certainly is a good process.
I would say there's a darn good chance that they at least try to make a trade for a center. But again,
I agree.
position that you need to fill, you will try as many different options as you can under the parameters of how many guys you can bring in to let there be a competition that sorts itself out. So the last two guys, cornerback Ladarius Webb Jr. out of Wake Forest, played at 3 or 4 different schools. A journeyman college defensive back who's the son of longtime Raven Ladarius Webb, who Ladarius Webb Jr. was 10 years old when his dad won a Super Bowl in Baltimore. I think the way I look at this is, one, relationship, two, showed enough in his senior year of college that like he can, if he has a good camp, he could easily make this roster. And you always need, you touched on it a minute ago, that they brought in there were three UDFA DBs that were on the Ravens at one point last year just because they were so hamstrung by injuries. So I think adding a cornerback to this list is important, because if there's a position that's probably going to be one. There are just so many injuries within that group. And then the last one is offensive tackle Diego Pounds out of Ole Miss. He had a 4th-round projection. There were people that really thought he'd get drafted. Getting him in FA could be considered a steal if he is what people projected him to be. Mainly left tackle at Ole Miss. Obviously, that's not a position that you need to fill at the moment. You have an All-Pro in Ronnie Stanley. However, if he's versatile enough on the offensive line, the Ravens will take that, because they need to make sure that they can field the best offensive line they possibly can, because they have to protect a very expensive quarterback and create running lanes for a future Hall of Famer and expensive running back. And they have one of the best backfield duos in all of the NFL. They have to make sure that they can do their best job to create holes for those guys and protect those guys if the Ravens are going to get anywhere in the playoffs.
Yeah. So Sam, of this group here, we said we were going to pick 3. Let's start with the quarterback competition here between Pavia and Fagnano. Do you feel like Fagnano has the edge coming in, being that he is maybe more of a prototypical quarterback build guy who probably carries less risk and also doesn't have to overcome any character concerns?
Yeah, I lean that way. I mean, he's older, he's having a little bit more experience, having had that kind of success later in his college career. I think the fact that he's going to bring less headlines is important. And I just don't think that they want to take a risk on Pavia, considering, I mean, he's under 5'10". You need a quarterback who can see over the offensive line. And I think Fagnano is just more ready-made to be that guy. I guess my one fear is, like, are you bringing in a Cooper Rush to be your number 3? And I say that not to bash too much on Cooper Rush, but Cooper Rush was not good last year, and Joe Fagnano sort of fits that mold of, like, he's a game manager who plays a very different style of football than both Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley. And we saw how that replacement project experiment worked last year, when kind of had to change the offense completely with Cooper Rush, and it really didn't work, and they were terrible. So the hope is that you don't have to get that far and worry about that, but you're going to have a third quarterback either way. And I think all signs point to Fagnano over Pavia, but Pavia is going to get a fair shake. Jesse Minter said as much. He can, like every other UDFA, he can come in here and prove himself. And it's worth mentioning that Jesse Minter, his first job when he left the Ravens after he spent 4 seasons on staff in Baltimore, he leaves to go be defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt with Clark Lee, still the head coach there. I'm sure that Jesse Minter was on the phone with Clark, who was selling why Pavia should at least get a shot in the NFL to work out with a team. So having that relationship there, I think, was probably a big part of the reason that Jesse felt confident in bringing in Pavia. But when it all shakes out, when it's all said and done, we watch these guys play real football, for the next couple months, I think Fignano will get the edge. What about you?
It's a really interesting comparison between two players who, snap for snap, were two of the most productive quarterbacks in college football last year. I mean, Fignano last season led the country in completions, attempts, completion percentage, passing yards, passing touchdowns, and yards per game. I mean, there's a lot of bold black on his sports reference page. It is pretty impressive. And as you know, not a rusher at all. Whereas Pavia, if you want, and that's what kind of like having Snoop Huntley has done for the Ravens, is they don't have to change their offense too much when they have to go turn to Snoop Huntley. He is a Lamar Jackson light for lack of a better term there. And obviously, if you turn to a guy like Fignano, as similar to Cooper Rush, you are going to have to do things a little bit differently. Now, if you're in a situation where you're onto your third string quarterback, things have not gone well anyway. But at the same time, the more disruption certainly does not bode well. And Pavia, look, I get this is different coaching staff now, but this is an organization that was willing to draft Shedeur Sanders last year to be their in competition for their quarterback number 3. They are willing to look past some character concerns. I think we see that across the board with this organization for several of their draft picks. That is not something that has necessarily had them shy away from players. They very much feel like they can get the guy in the room and help mold him into a personality that is worth investing in being a quality player. So I wouldn't say in the Ravens' eyes Pavia is knocked necessarily for that. Maybe he has to prove it a little bit more. I'm intrigued by him. I am. I do think that he was a very productive player. He does a lot with his legs. 10 rushing touchdowns last year for Vanderbilt. Obviously, the height thing is important. He would be the shortest quarterback in the NFL. Short quarterbacks have had plenty of success. I mean, Kyler Murray has had some great years there. Bryce Young is an up-and-coming player. I mean, Drew Brees is maybe the most famous one. Russell Wilson. I mean, it is possible, even at the height that Pavia is at. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to be able to shake you're going to be a running back discussion until he's actually able to prove that he can be the kind of pocket-controlled passer that you really are questioning is in there. Because when you have to be able to step up in the pocket and you've got rushers bearing in on you and you're struggling to see over the line, that is the moments where coaches are concerned about your ability to overcome. So I do think that it's intriguing and worth bringing in and seeing what he can do. But I do think that Fignano is probably the leader, even though I do want to see what the wild card has in store.
It's funny because this is like we leapfrogged the backup quarterback theory, where fans always are fascinated by the guy who's the number 2 quarterback, because when the guy you don't know about is always going to theoretically, and not the case with the Ravens, but theoretically, like, the backup is always the intriguing option because you don't always know what you have in him, or he might be better than the starter, or there's some intrigue with what that might look like, and people want change, et cetera, et cetera. I really hope we don't have to give this much oxygen to a potential practice squad third string quarterback. And this would not be the case if it wasn't the Heisman runner-up, who has been so talkative, polarizing, controversial, whatever you want to say. That clip of when he was in college, when someone asked him who was better college quarterback, Lamar Jackson or Peyton Manning, maybe, and he was like, "It was me. I'm better than both."
Get out of here, man.
That's headlines. That's why we're gonna have to talk about them. But at the end of the day, as you said, if whoever the third string practice squad quarterback is even putting on his helmet on a Sunday, the Ravens are in real trouble. So it will be a competition. One of them will make the final roster. I just hope it's not something we have to spend too much time talking about, because, as a reminder, the Ravens have a 2-time, should be 3-time most valuable player at quarterback who is looking to have a bounce back year. I hope we can spend some time this summer really digging, once we see him on the field, of course, really digging into what a bounce back year might look like for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, since with the timing of when we started this podcast, the most we've talked about Lamar is about restructuring his contract, and nothing about him is actually the football player. So definitely, as this offseason goes on, we'll be doing some deep dives on Lamar and exactly what maybe a bounce back season looks like for him. But let's look at these other 3 names here and see if we can agree or disagree on picking two to make the team between center Nick Dawkins, cornerback Ladarius Webb Jr., and tackle Diego Pounds. Does anyone jump out to you between those three as the best chance to make this 53-man roster for the Ravens?
I'm leaning Ladarius just because of position, and he's probably the best option at that position among FAs. The Ravens feel really Chandler Rivers, who was their fifth
round
out of Duke. So they feel like, they address that position in the draft. They're going to have Bilal Kone come back. Maybe they do have enough. They have enough guys at corner, but you also can never have enough guys at corner. So if he has a good training camp, I would lean Ladarius over the other two because, again, you have three centers who you're already deciding between. You have both tackle spots locked up, and you have three guards to play two spots. So, and you might also bring in another center. Is that 10 guys who are trying to figure out for 6 spots, 10, 11 guys? I'm not sure that you need to spend so much time on bringing in another UDFA to on the final roster, I should say. They'll have several compete for those spots, but I'm not sure you need to carry more than 9 or 10.
Yeah, I think the Ladarius Webb Jr. conversation is interesting because, like you say, Chandler Rivers it has a leg up certainly for being in that cornerback room, and I think it's also worth mentioning they also have UDFA Matthew McDoom, who spent his college career at Coastal Carolina before going to Cincinnati as a senior, was a kick returner at various points throughout his college career, so could help in special teams as well. And a bit of a playmaker as well. I say that because I have used him a lot in NCAA College Football 25. So
that's an important detail.
Important detail to note that I'm very familiar with him. And as soon as I saw his name pop up on the UDFA's list, I was like, oh, my guy is in there. Let's go. But no, I think Ladarius Webb is certainly worth highlighting in this conversation, given his ties to the organization, but also with the kind of state of this secondary. I mean, it's a group in flux, and I think it's very much a group where there's a lot of opportunity for guys to earn their way onto the team, whether it is going to be a practice squad role or who gets called up later in the year, or somebody who could actually crack this 53-man roster. I think there's room for conversation for both. So I agree with you that he's certainly in that mix, but I think Diego Pounds is probably my choice of this three, the guy that I feel the most confident in. Just because for Dawkins at center, I think that they're going to make a move. And that center depth chart, like they want to see what they have in Emory Jones, perhaps at that position. They've really been, trying out a lot of different guys there in a practice squad over the last year. So it's very much a position that I think there's more moves to come, and we're going to get some clarity on it. And it's just being that there's only one, it is a harder position to climb up the depth chart at. So I'm going with Pounds, who had, as we mentioned, a 4th-round draft position, somebody who certainly could make this team just based off of his traits alone as a depth offensive lineman. There's a lot of, more uncertainty in this group maybe than any, but I really like in some of the film that I've watched on Pounds, the way he moves on the line, was a huge part of that Ole Miss offensive line group, which was one of the better offensive lines in the country last year. So I think Pounds is probably my pick as the top of the number 3, but I like Webb as well, and I think that he is probably my number 2, leaving Dawkins as the odd man out.
Nick Dawkins, make us eat all of our words and
yeah.
Way to make it. And to our listeners, please send us which of these 5 or others do you think could be 1 or 2 of the guys to UDFAs to sneak in this roster where you feel like they need to add position-wise, and are you buying the Diego Pavia hype too? I'm curious what people think about that, because at this point it just feels like rage bait that he's here and that we have to talk about him. So I'm curious what some of our listeners are thinking about Pavia.
Yeah, always welcome the feedback and the engagement. We're at Sun Early Birds on all the socials, so sure to shoot us a message there at whatever, and as well as our personal handles, which are always tagged from that account as well. So let's talk some Orioles, but first, a word from our sponsors.
The Maryland Lottery presents Home Run Legends.
Yeah, I know a little bit about leaving the yard, the backyard.
You too can be a home run legend with Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery. You'll have a chance to win instant cash, tickets to a game, and more. Please play responsibly.
All right, so the Orioles are in the middle, as we are recording, in the middle of a series against the Yankees. As our episode comes out, it's actually a wraparound series, so they're still going to be playing a game Monday before heading to Miami. So we didn't want to talk too much about this series, as it's very much still happening. In fact, as we were recording, it is Sunday morning. So Trey Gibson, who called up from the minors, the Orioles' #1 pitching prospect, has yet to make his MLB debut, as he will tonight. So certainly something that we'll talk about on the next episode. But for now, we wanted to look just at this offense as a whole. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we talked a lot about Colton Cowser and how much he has struggled this year, but we kind of wanted to look at some of the other guys in this lineup, because it's not just Cowser that's been holding back this group from being the true juggernaut that the Orioles expect it to be. And we're going to go through 5 different players here who have been underperforming, whether it's based on their standards or just being bad in general, and kind of discussing why we think they are struggling so much how they are struggling to this point, and what exactly needs to change for them to get back to being the type of player that the Orioles think they can be. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it, Sam. We're going to start with Gunnar Henderson. So far this year, the power has been there. That's 9 home runs for him on the year. At one point, he was leading the majors. Has been passed a little bit here. Guys like Munetaka Murakami have gone on a bit of a tear into, I believe, 13 is the most of any player so far. So Gunnar still has some work to do in that department, but the power is not the problem. What really has been the problem is the strikeouts entering play on Sunday. Gunnar Henderson has 48 strikeouts on the year. That trails only the Angels' Zach Neto with 52 for the most in the American League. His /9 on the year is 209, 275, 460. So that on-base percentage and batting average really stand out. He's not drawn his walks, and it's something that's declined each of the last 2 years. The power last year had kind of disappeared for Gunnar, but the walks also went away too, and that was maybe a little bit of him pressing at the plate, trying to do too much, be the guy that the lineup could put the whole lineup on his back, and wasn't really able to do that with his power being sapped like it was with the shoulder injury he had. But now he's fully healthy, and he's swinging a lot, chasing a lot of pitches outside the zone, not letting at-bats come to him. And so far, it has made Gunnar Henderson go from being an otherworldly player to about a league average one with some pop, which is not exactly what you are looking for out of the player who's supposed to be your MVP candidate.
That is the complete opposite of what we expected from Gunnar. After him playing in the WBC, after we had all these conversations about kind of him struggling last year and being able to come back and be the guy this year, he's up to 9 home runs. He's got the power. This was supposed to be Gunnar's year, break back out year, whatever you want to call it. And then instead, over the last week, we've seen a lot of three-pitch strikeouts, and it's discouraging to see. And we're going to kind of get into the 5. I'm curious, and maybe this is a bad time to ask. Maybe I should wait until we get to the 5. But I almost feel most confident in him to be the one to revert back, because Gunnar Henderson being league average feels like this should be an oxymoron, and it's frustrating to see him struggle to the extent that he does. But we've seen Adley kind of regress back to or get back to where people thought he would be. That maybe this is a frustrating stretch for Gunnar, but that his competitive nature will take over to the fact that he'll get back to where we know he can be. So I'm interested, and again, maybe I should wait on asking you this, but that do you feel more confident in him compared to other guys? It's an interesting question, but
I feel very confident in Gunnar Henderson being Gunnar Henderson, 100%. The thing about Gunnar is that there is a lot of swing and miss to his game, and that's something the Orioles can live with. High strikeout totals aren't as scary as they used to be. You can deal with swing and miss if he is pulling the ball, putting it in the air, and going over the fence, and he is doing that. He's pulling the ball, I think, the highest rate of anybody on the team, which is a great sign that when he's making contact, it's doing the right kind of things. He's just not making the contact enough. And what is concerning to me is just the amount he's going out of the zone to get there. He is a guy who hunts. He's a hunter. He knows what pitch he wants, and he's going to do damage on it when he gets it. And whether it's him not getting the pitches that he wants or him not recognizing the pitches, maybe he's just seeking a little too much and really kind of get tunnel visioning for certain pitches. when you are swinging this much out of the zone, it is a sign of somebody who is trying to do just a little bit too much, and maybe that's bled over from last year. The team, struggling to this point, but he's got the guys in this lineup now. I mean, how well Taylor Ward is hitting, Jeremiah Jackson, you've got Pete Alonso behind you. I mean, there is no need for Gunnar to try to be anything but himself. And I think, he's a young player. He's only 23 years old. This is growing pains that you would expect for any player at his age. But at the same time, he's set the bar so high that, you expect MVP caliber play. In order for him to get back there, he is going to have to fine-tune his pitch selection just a little bit better so that when the pitchers know that they're going to throw a ball outside the zone, he's not going to swing too much at it, and then it comes to him and he gets the pitches that he can do the most damage on.
Gunnar's struggling, and we have faith that he'll be fine. Pete Alonso, maybe more just unlucky.
Yeah, Alonso so far hitting the ball incredibly hard. I believe his average exit velocity on the season is 95.5 miles per hour. That's 98th percentile in MLB. So hitting the ball as hard as anybody, but the number of hits have not really been there. 205 batting average on the year. Still's got a 317 OBP, which isn't great, but when you see that disparity between the on-base percentage and the batting average, it tells you he's drawing a lot of walks, which is good. A guy who's struggling, if he's still able to draw a bunch of walks, be able to remain a productive player even when he's kind of going through it, is a great sign. A couple of home runs in New York have raised his home run total now, and his BABIP, which batting average on balls in play, is a great indicator of how lucky or unlucky a player is. 232 on the year, which is career lifetime BABIP is above 260, so that tells you he's gotten a bit unlucky there. Hitting the ball incredibly hard, right at guys at times. I think honestly, once he is able to get going, it is going to come fast, and maybe it's already happening. Maybe we're already starting to see the Pete Alonso turnaround. I mean, it's something that we've talked. Josh and I have talked about this off air of like not even really wanting to touch Pete Alonso struggling early on because we don't want to make too much of it, because it just doesn't seem like it's something that's going to last for very long. I mean, he's not a guy who I expect to hit for a very high average in general. If he's hovering around 240 by the end of the year, that's about what I expect from him. But the home runs, the power, it's there. He's going to get his 30 plus on the year. I don't think there's any concern about that whatsoever.
I think that's completely fair because it is Pete Alonso, and they got him to put the ball over the fence, and his defense has been a little bit of a surprise too. I know that's not really what we're focusing on, but he's been a pretty exceptional defender as of late, right?
Yeah, I mean, even the advanced metrics are liking what they're seeing from him, and he's made some like dazzling plays, some of which Matt Olson is kind of the gold standard at first base defensively for the Braves, and some of the flashy plays that Alonso's made, I'd be like, Matt Olson would have made that look pretty routine, but at the same time, he's making the plays. It doesn't matter if he's having to go diving down, spinning, and tossing the ball up to make it happen. He's doing it, and we've seen some good seasons from him defensively before. Maybe not this good. We don't know how sustainable necessarily that is, but Jacob Kaltenmeyer, we talked about this in the last episode, a great story about the work that he's been putting in at first base, the kind of training glove he's been using, and it's clearly showing dividends. And I think Miguel Cairo, Orioles infield coach, deserves a lot of credit for what he has done with this infield, because we've talked a lot about how good Pete Alonso has been at first base. Jeremiah Jackson has been excellent at second, and Kobe Mayo has looked like a capable third baseman when we had a lot of questions about whether he could play that position at all. So Miguel Cairo coming in has done a lot of great work with the Orioles infield, which is maybe along with catcher the two bright spots of the Orioles defensively so far this year. But yeah, Alonso, my concern level for him is basically a 1 out of 10 because he definitely, the peripherals and the stuff under the hood certainly say that he should be hitting a lot better than he is right now.
Matt, the next guy on our list is Tyler O'Neill. He's only played 15 games so far as of this recording, but he has one extra base hit. His slash line is 220, 360, 293. Not to say that he was going to be one of the best hitters on this team, but that is not where you expected O'Neill to be at this point in the season, right?
No, and certainly missing time hasn't helped him at all. But that 360 OBP is great. I mean, he is really laying off a lot of pitches outside the zone, drawing a lot of walks, letting the pitches come to him. The thing is he just hasn't been doing the damage that we expect Tyler O'Neill to be doing when he does get his pitches. His medium contact rate, so you have weak contact, medium contact, and hard contact rates. His medium contact rate is extremely high so far this year, which is a bit odd of just a guy who is able to get his pitch, but not really doing the kind of damage that we've been accustomed to. Even last year, when he had a obviously dreadful year at the plate and wasn't healthy very much, he was still hitting the ball extremely hard. So there's a lot of reason to believe that if he was able to play 100+ games in a season, that he'd be able to, maybe approach the 30 home run mark. And so far, with only 1 home run on the year, just not really catching the ball with the barrel of the bat. And maybe that's a mechanical thing for him of just the swing path and getting to make sure that the barrel is catching the baseball more often. Obviously hitting is a very fickle thing, and you make adjustments throughout the year based on the way guys are pitching you. And we just haven't seen that come to fruition for O'Neill. And like you said, only 15 games so far. So not a guy who has been able to get in a rhythm. Also has kind of fallen into a bit of a timeshare playing in the outfield with Dylan Beavers as well. So, we're seeing Colton Cowser riding the bench a lot because of Leody Taveras playing center field, and that has really made in right more of a platoon situation between Dylan Beavers and Tyler O'Neill. So not getting a ton of playing time, considering the Orioles haven't faced a ton of lefties. That's changed here with the Yankee series. Maybe he gets going now, being able to get into the lineup a little bit more. But yeah, really just not making the kind of contact that we're accustomed Tyler O'Neill to making.
Matt, how do you make sense of a guy like Kobe Mayo who's either going to put the baseball on the moon or he's going to strike out with the lowest on-base percentage on the team?
Yeah, Mayo being this kind of mold of a young power hitter who's very pull heavy, but has a lot of swing and miss. That's a hard skill set to translate right away because you are so dependent on one type of swing is getting a hold of the ball and hitting it to your side and doing so over the fence over and over again. Defenses are going to shift that way. And, when you're not making enough contact, that 30% strikeout rate that he has on so far, among the highest on the team. And just for reference, league average is 22%. So for Mayo to be striking out at 30%, it's just not a number that's going to be sustainable for a guy who doesn't make enough, line drive contact, isn't really getting a ton of singles. I think over a third of his hits so far at the major league level have gone for extra bases. So that tells you right there that, he's able to get a lot of power and generate a lot of hard contact, but at the same time, just isn't putting the ball in play enough to be able to, in between his power surges, to get on base and remain a productive player. Since that 3 straight games with a home run last week, he's 1 for 15 at the plate, 6 strikeouts. It's just been a very up and down year for him so far. But overall, that 160 batting average is just not going to cut it. And as we get closer and closer to a potential return for Jackson Holiday, Jeremiah Jackson is very much still a guy who needs to be in this lineup on an everyday basis. And if they're going to give the second base job back to Jackson Holiday, I would imagine we're going to see more of Jeremiah Jackson at third, and that probably squeezes out Kobe Mayo and or Blaze Alexander.
At the end of the day, all 5 of these guys just want to be hitting like Jeremiah Jackson.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
He set the bar very high. Matt, the last guy on our list, he works good at bats. He uses his speed, just not seeing the results. That's Dylan Beavers. What's your takeaway on what you've seen from Beavers so far?
Yeah, the results haven't been there yet, but I think we could have said similar things for Samuel Basallo. Like, you see the vision with this player, and Basallo has really come alive now where, his OPS plus is over 100, above a league average hitter from what we've seen from him. Very much a different skill set for Basallo. But when you look at Dylan Beavers and the way he works at bats, he gets into deep counts, he draws walks when they come to him. He just has an approach that feels very much beyond his years for a guy who is really in his first full season at the major league level. The 298 OBP is nothing to write home about, but when you're hitting 217, to be able to have an on-base percentage that's 80 points higher, I think is really encouraging for once he does start to generate a little bit more contact, you'll be able to see just how much that could jump very much quickly. And I think also, the power is very much there for Beavers too. He makes very solid contact. I think his line drive rates have been pretty good so far. So maybe is going to be more of a doubles hitter, a guy who plugs the gaps and can get to second or third base on those kinds of balls. But it's going to sneak out from time to time as well. We've seen what it looks like when he gets a hold of a pitch, and certainly he can do a lot of damage there. But I think overall I've been encouraged with what Dylan Beavers has done. It's just, they're relying on him to be an above-average player right away, given the kind of role that he has had for this team. And part of that's been due to injury, with Tyler O'Neill missing time and Colton Cowser really struggling. And not to mention that his defense in the outfield has actually been pretty bad so far. It's certainly something that has been a problem. But at the plate, I'm very much not worried about Dylan Beavers. I think he's going to be a fine player, somebody who is going to get on base at a decent clip once he is able just to get a little bit more contact and putting the ball in play more often.
From 1 to 5, 1 being no worries at all, and 5 being I'm probably a little worried. Do you agree with Pete Alonso 1, Gunnar Henderson 2, Dylan Beavers 3, Kobe Mayo 4, Tyler O'Neill 5? Do you agree with that ranking for concern level, or am I off base here?
I mean, I would probably put Mayo at 5 just because we haven't seen him do it before. And, I think he's somebody who's going to have a very long and productive career, but it is something where, his skill set kind of takes time to mold into that kind of player. And we might not see it in terms of 2026. We might not see it happen yet. It might be something that takes a little bit more time into his career to fully manifest himself. And for him to be that kind of player, he needs to refine that approach. O'Neill, with that 360 OBP, I'm very encouraged that he is going to be able to, once he makes maybe some tweaks, be able to be the type of hitter that we expect Tyler O'Neill to be. So I would put him probably at 3, Beavers at 4. With Beavers, I like I said, I like the foundation for him a lot. It is just more of a question of how long it might take for him to kind of reach that full potential as well. And I like I think Pete Alonso at 1 is probably correct, but I think it's 1A, 1B with him and Gunnar.
Yeah. Yes.
Gunnar's signs maybe are more worrisome, but he's also just a player who can just flip the switch, where all of a sudden he just figures it out and goes on an absolute tear. So I think Gunnar Henderson still very much is the best player in this team when he's at his best. So I think both of those guys are going to be just fine. There's definitely a massive teardrop between the two of them and these other 3. But I was high on Tyler O'Neill coming into this year. I'll definitely own that. Felt like he was being very much slept on by this fan base and the baseball community at large for what he can do when healthy and at his best. And I still very much expect him to be that type of player. I'm interested to see what it looks like when he gets some regular playing time and really starts to settle in, because, he's had some torrid stretches in his career where, he legitimately an MVP caliber player, just has never been able to stay healthy for a full season.
Matt, I have one more question before we get out of here, because this made up some waves, caught some steam on social media, etc. Albie took some onus. Orioles manager Craig Albertaz said that this 3 games below 500 he says, this is on me as much as anyone else. And I think any smart person watching this team would say that it's on everyone else more than it is on him, but he's saying the right things. What was your read, or just thoughts, takeaways, etc., on hearing Albie really say, put the spotlight on himself?
Yeah, credit for Jacob, who's in New York and got that quote from his post-game scrum on Saturday, where Craig Albertaz said, as their frustrating 15 and 18 start, that's on me. And, for Albertaz to say that, I think shows good leadership. I think he, like you said, he's saying the right thing. It's exactly what I'd want my manager to say. If I'm the Orioles front office or an Orioles player or anyone within that organization, no one wants to see a manager pass off blame to anybody unless, the timing really calls for maybe to put, some coals under the feet of a player or something like that. I think we saw Brandon Hyde do that sometimes, where he wasn't afraid to call guys out when they needed to be called out. We haven't gotten to that point with Craig Albertaz yet. I mean, he's still very much young into his MLB managing career. So I think if he were to do that already, that would be a troublesome sign. But at the same time, it's not on him. I don't think anyone really, can fault Albertaz for the job that he's done so far. I think his lineups have been overall pretty solid. He hasn't really messed with the top 4 for the most part, except for when Adley Rutschman was on the injured list. But we're seeing, besides Gunnar Henderson and Taylor Ward swapping places against lefties and righties, that top 4 with Adley and Pete Alonso in there have been pretty stable. It's really been, Jeremiah Jackson has kind of moved up and down a little bit. When they're facing a lefty, or they're getting a guy like Weston Wilson kind of higher up in the order just for the platoon advantage. all things that I think I'm fine with overall. Jonathan Rodriguez in the 3-hole against the lefty was a bit odd, but that was when Adley was hurt, so that kind of explained that. Other than that, I think the lineups have been fine. I think his bullpen usage has been pretty understandable. I think he's been pretty willing to roll the dice on using his bench in key situations, not afraid to empty it to get a rally going, and it's paid off a couple of times. So overall, I think Craig Albanaz has done a fine job as a manager. It's not on him, but to see him take the responsibility for the start they've had so far, it's an encouraging sign, and I think it's something that the players should internalize a little bit and be like, okay, our manager is willing to fall under the knife for us. Will that light a fire under them? Is that something that can help get them going? We'll see.
Yeah, just you took the words out of my mouth. This is the third manager they've had in a calendar year, and that should light a fire under the players' butts to see, just to hear him say like this is on me, and they should they have the relationship with their manager to say we don't want him taking the fall for us because they know it's on them. So commendable if nothing.
Absolutely.
Even if it's blatantly wrong.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes you have to live in your own universe as a manager to set the narrative for your clubhouse, and that's exactly what Craig Albanez is doing there. So certainly commendable for him, but one way or another, this team has to start playing a little bit better as the Yankees continue to extend their lead as the best team, not just in the American League East, but in the entire American League, which has been very so far this year. Orioles are hanging around just because a lot of teams are off to slow starts, and the National League is where a lot of the winning records seem to lie right now. So this is an opportunity for the Orioles to really start to establish themselves, but also maybe throw themselves really into the thick of the race here, as the calendar is still very much only in May, but we've already seen two teams change managers because of their slow starts. So certainly, if teams are willing to show that they think it's time for a managerial change at this point in the calendar, there is certainly a case for teams to show urgency as they get off to not so stellar starts like the Orioles have. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap there. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to give the show 5 stars on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe. And also give us a follow over on social media. We're at Sun Early Birds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Sam, any final words for the good people?
Just last thing I'll say, just to go back to Ravens again, we had a brief few moments to watch the initial moments of the first time we saw a Jesse Minter football team on the field. The energy felt different. Felt like so many new faces. We just saw them kind of work through the first 30, 40 minutes of practice in a different way. And I'm excited to kind of get a better sense of what that looks like. And excited to talk with you about as we sort of start to unravel and make sense of the new age of the Jesse Minter era in Baltimore. And for those listening, please do not fall for the Diego Pavia rage bait and try to think logically about what this team is going to look like, because they have a chance to be really good this year or not.
Yeah, and a word of caution there. Things felt different in spring training with Craig Albanaz because they were different, because it was a new guy at the top. And so far, they are off to a mediocre start. So certainly things need to be done differently for wins to happen, and a lot has to happen between now and the start of the season. So we will see how that unfolds and how the Orioles continue to try and turn their season around here with the calendar in early May. He's Sam Cohn. I'm Matt Weyrich. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a good one.